Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about Metal Lords 2022, and we're going to talk about gatekeeping. All right, so if you ain't seen it, Metal Lords 2022 is a very interesting film that I think radiates at exactly the same frequency as Dungeons & Dragons when it comes. So basically, it's about three high school students who have different relationships with heavy metal. Hunter is a major heavy metal head. He's a heavy metal expert, and he shreds on the guitar. He actually can play heavy metal. His friend Kevin is a dude who is growing in interest in heavy metal. He only does heavy metal to hang out with his friend Hunter, who it's its main jam. And then Kevin gets a girlfriend who plays the cello, right? And Hunter and Kevin are trying to put up a post death metal band, right? A heavy metal band. And so Kevin's like, hey, she plays cello and she can play heavy metal, and she's actually a really good cellist. So we're gonna have a guitarist, we're gonna have a drummer, and we're gonna have a celloist, right? And so Hunter says, no, we are definitely not gonna have a celloist in our heavy metal band. And Kevin's like, why not? And he's like, cause cellos ain't heavy metal, right? And so, like, when I hear this, I'm like, oh, yeah, I see where you're going, right? And this is kind of like if you play Dungeons & Dragons and, somebody's like, says, hey, why don't we make this storyteller game where all of us are, like, none of us are the dungeon master. We all have equal control of the game. We just get rid of the dungeon master. A storytelling game. It's the same as D&D, right? No, it's not, right? Like, no, right? Like, and so, like, he's like, this ain't heavy metal, right? And I don't like the idea of a celloist coming into our heavy metal band. Now, there is a little bit of thing here, like, because cello isn't a normal instrument, right? Like, there are thousands of cellists, right? There are probably 1 in 1,000 who actually want to play cello, right? And there are 999 who picked up cello because they're like, oh, I can get a scholarship because every school needs a celloist, right? And so he's like, this person doesn't even want to play cello, let alone play in a heavy metal band. And Hunter's like, I don't want this person in our heavy metal band, right? And now it's interesting, okay? So he's gatekeeping her. He's gatekeeping Kevin's girlfriend from being in the heavy metal band, right? Now, gatekeeping is incredibly interesting, right? So I actually am highly opposed to some gatekeeping and 100% in support of other gatekeeping. Let's talk about it, right? So in my opinion, you cannot gatekeep based on gender, race, or anything that someone doesn't have a choice over, right? But you absolutely can gatekeep off of roles and preferences, right? In my opinion, right? So let me explain what I mean by that, okay? Let me give the perfect example of this, right? So basically, the cello, like, so here's a good example of this. Let's say you are a vegan and you start a vegan group, and your community center is like, hey, you guys want to have a vegan group, and basically we're going to give you an hour a week. You guys meet on Wednesdays and from 7 to 8 p.m. and any vegan can come and they can share recipes. They can talk about maybe problems that you have from a health perspective because you're a vegan, right? Or just health concerns that are particular to vegans, right? What vitamins to take if you're not getting enough protein or whatever, right? And just support each other, right? And also, like, what if you became a vegan like a year ago and you're struggling and you want to go back, right? The vegans can help you with that. Well, here's the thing, right? So you got this vegan group and they're all supporting each other. And then one week a dude shows up and he says, hey, I'm a barbecue pit master. And they're like, what? And he's like, yeah, I love barbecuing pigs, chickens, and cows, right? And they're like, well, why are you here? And he's like, it's a free group, right? I can come in, right? And they're like, okay, well, we're going to start sharing recipes. And they're like, hey, this is a hummus dip, right? And he's like, you know what's good to eat is barbecue chicken with dry rub. And everybody's like, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, what are you doing here? What's the, you could gatekeep the crap out of that dude. You should gatekeep the crap out of that part. He's there, and he ain't there for a good reason, right? And he ain't vegan, and he is ruining the vegan thing. Get rid of him. Gatekeep the crap out of him, right? Like, in my opinion, right? That's my take, right? And what's really interesting is I really had a lot of sympathy for Hunter on his gatekeeping here. He's like, hey, a heavy metal band has bass, guitar, and drums. You have to have those three. You can add other stuff in there, but you ain't got those three. You ain't got a heavy metal. And I kind of get it, because I'm like, I really feel this way about Dungeons & Dragons as storyteller games, right? You take Dungeon Master out of a tabletop role-playing game, it ain't Dungeons & Dragons, right? You take the Dungeon Master out of Dungeons & Dragons, it ain't Dungeons & Dragons, right? It's perfectly fine to play that nonsense, but get shoved over in the storyteller game pile. You are not a tabletop role-playing game, and you certainly aren't D&D without a Dungeon Master, right? And so I really had a lot of sympathy for Hunter when he's like, I don't want a celloist in my heavy metal band, right? And what was really interesting was Kevin was like, it's cool to have this celloist in our heavy metal band. And Hunter's like, you don't know the difference between AC/DC and Van Halen, right? You don't get to choose. You don't get to say what heavy metal is because you don't know about it. And I've forgotten more about heavy metal than you ever knew, right? And so it's really, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of get that. Like, expertise has something to do with it. If you don't know the thing, you can't say what the thing is and what it is not, right? So I really took a lot away from Metal Lords 2022. And if you watch this movie, you're going to see, like, every problem these people have about heavy metal, we have about D&D. And this movie is an interesting discussion of Dungeons & Dragons problems. Just insert heavy metal instead of D&D. But every problem they have, we have. This thing is resonating at the frequency of Dungeons & Dragons. Metal Lords 2022 is absolutely really fascinating. I'd love to hear if you've seen this thing. What did you think? And then what are your thoughts on the following? Do you agree with me that you can gatekeep by role, right? Like if a barbecue pitmaster shows up at your vegan group, gatekeep the crap out of him. Like, keep him out, right? Like that, Now, of course, you're just gonna say please leave, like, and then maybe you like, and if you can't get him to leave, maybe you meet on a different night at a different time, so like, of course you shouldn't use any physical means to gatekeep, right? It needs to be safe, but you can say, hey, no, you don't belong here, right? And so I think there are circumstances where gatekeeping is absolutely appropriate, right? That's my take, okay? Also, I'd like to hear your thoughts on, so do you agree that that gatekeeping by role, that works? I think that's very workable. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. The other one is, who gets to say what a thing is? Does expertise give you more authority to say what a thing is and what a thing is not, right? I think it does. I side with Hunter on this. And then the other thing is, did you see Metal Lords 2022? What did you think of it? Particularly from the perspective of Dungeons & Dragons. Love to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much. Thank you for liking and subscribing. And please consider liking and subscribing. And have a wonderful millennium.